Welcome back to part 3 of the XJ700 rebuild. This particular video covers off the carburetors. Carburetors are very complicated pieces of machinery, and there's a lot of pieces and parts in there. And to make matters worse, or to make matters more critical, so much of how the bike runs will depend on the carburetors and how well they're set up and rebuilt and cleaned and all that sort of thing. I didn't show the disassembly of the carburetors. It's quite involved, and frequently screws become stripped and have to be drilled out. Carbs have to be soaked to have jets unseized from their housings. But regardless, it's fairly straightforward. The kit I bought for the rebuild came from XJ Forever, and it is fantastic. It's the comprehensive deluxe rebuild kit, which includes carb hats, as you can see here. It also includes jets, seals, and O-rings, all the things necessary to do this properly. The cleaning starts with the bowls, and that's the easy part. Most critical is are all the little passages which I have to get to with homemade tools. For example, the enrichener or the starter choke jet. It relies on a tiny little passage in the bowl, and that passage is hard to get to without some means of homemade tool. In my case, I took strands from an electrical wire, which are made of obviously copper. I clipped off a piece and pinched it into a piece of brass tubing that I bought at a hobby shop. That allowed me to get down deep into the passage where I otherwise couldn't. I also used this tool in some of the other passages within the carburetor, such as the pilot jet passage. It does a great job, as you can see here, shining the light through. It's clear as a whistle. A 35-year-old motorcycle also has dried up old O-rings in these tiny passages. So I made another little tool out of another piece of brass rod, turned the end into a sharp hook, which allowed me to reach down into, in this case, the air-fuel mixture screw bore and pull out the little squished O-ring that sits at its base. Made the job a whole lot easier and a lot less frustrating. If available, I habitually change jets in a carburetor when I rebuild them. For example, the needle jet at the top of the emulsion tube, the opening to it or the orifice to it meets the needle can wear into an egg shape as opposed to being perfectly round over time. The needle, being in the airflow of the engine, tends to be drawn towards the intake of the engine and wears that side of the orifice of the jet. This in turn can cause your bike to run very rich, obviously reducing your fuel mileage and power. Now, after all these jets were replaced and the orifice is cleaned and the outsides scrubbed down, fuel seals changed and everything, there's quite a difference. The carburetors look clean and new inside and out. As they come back together, they need to be set as close as possible to the factory settings. Of course, there will be some tweaking once they're on the bike. In particular, the float height here is a little too rich. In other words, when this is upside down now, when it's upside right, it's going to allow a higher fuel level. So what you have to do in this particular case is manually bend the tang that controls that height. And the spec on this particular component is 17.5 millimeters, the float, above or below, technically, the gasket face of the body of the carburetor. This should be done in gentle increments. So I have a set of pliers here, and just gently bend that tang down a little bit, just gently, and try it. It might take 2 or 3 tries. 2 of the carburetors were bang on, and 2 of them were off. So what I did was I took my time. One of them, in this particular one, I think only took 1 try to get it right, whereas the other one took 3 tries. But it's something you want to sneak up on rather than go over and have to back up. You know, it's at this point of the build where you want to take your time. You want to do this right. And if you forget to do something, or you can't remember if you did something, it's best to take the time, disassemble the component and check, double check, triple check if you're still not sure. Because once it's on the bike, it's a much more involved process to have to haul it off. Secondly, once it's on, it's not working properly. It's doubly frustrating. But having a nice clean set of carbs, polished up and ready to roll, in this particular case, obviously they're not synchronized. It'll have to be on the bike for that. So I try to eyeball them as best I can, knowing that the bike, when it starts, is going to be very rough, and I'll warm it up and slowly take my time synchronizing them. Once synchronized, I'll go back and double check my fuel mixture screw, which is all that slow speed stuff. And then hopefully the bike runs like a doll for the foreseeable future. In my opinion, carburetor health or cleanliness or tune is so fundamental to how your bike will run. And taking extra time here, focusing on this, and your funds and efforts towards this should pay dividends when it comes time to get this bike running. Anyway, hopefully you found this amusing. We'll see you next time. Take care.